Welcome to Energy Linguist, a sacred space for awakening souls ready to receive divine transmissions and the raw truth that sets them free. I am Laura Ahern, a spiritual channel and energy translator here to bring through messages from highest guidance to help you hear your inner knowing, reclaim who you are beneath the noise, and live from the truth within. Take a breath. You've found the space where remembering begins. Hello, everyone. This is Laura, the Energy Linguist, and I am so excited to have you joining me here today on this next episode of Energy Linguist podcast, where we get to decode your energy, heal your patterns, and awaken your path through the receiving of divinely transmitted messages. These messages not only awaken our minds and stretch our consciousness, but they also start to heal the very core of our vibration. For those of you who may have joined me on other episodes up until now, thank you so much for your support and for the willingness to stretch yourself and receive. I want all of you listeners to be aware that these podcasts are more than just transmissions. They're actually much more sacred because what's happening here in the transmission and translation of these messages is that we begin to heal. What happens is that the vibrations that are being channeled through are of such a high frequency that it starts to drive out the denser frequencies that exist within our being, bringing us back into this natural alignment and harmony with our unique vibrational blueprint. And so if you're feeling this stuckness when you might hear some of these messages, or maybe it's hard to compute in the intellect, I want you to know that you're exactly where you're meant to be. Because much of the information that is being channeled here is much more intuitive than it is intellectual. And this is a divine setup. It's meant to be this way because divinity is attempting to stretch your consciousness, to break through blocks and barriers that exist in your mind, to help you raise your awareness to a higher perspective. Because from this place, you can live your life with more peace and joy and authenticity, which is exactly what they're calling you into on today's episode. Today's episode is one that can be quite uncomfortable to speak on because it has to do with hiding. It has to do with much of what we are hiding from. And as I start to reveal what this message really is, you're going to notice that divinity is making it clear that the hiding is what is keeping the pattern in play, is what they're saying. Many, many times in our lives, in fact, unfortunately, the majority of our lives, we are showing up in a way that is acceptable to the masses. And we have learned this. This isn't just me. This isn't just you as listeners. This is the collective. We've touched on before. You may have heard me say, we are required to be accepted and loved for our survival in our infancy. And we desire this love and acceptance. And so the price we end up paying for it is actually quite extreme. In a previous podcast, Divinity talked about this being shamed for showing up as we are. And they're asking me to go deeper into this topic today with all of you because what's at play here is bigger than what it seems. On the surface, it just seems like a facade. It just seems like, okay, maybe there's a little people pleasing going on here. Maybe I'm just doing it because I want to keep the peace. There's all of these rational justifications for showing up in a way that is acceptable to others. But the price that gets paid is ourselves. And it's actually much bigger than that. The price is much more expensive than that. Because when we choose to sacrifice what we innately are in an attempt to please others, The irony, the painful irony, is that we actually create more discord and rejection. Because what happens is like attracts like, meaning if we are in an inward state of self-rejection, what we will experience outwardly is rejection. And so divinity wants to channel and bring this into something that is tangible. So I want to explain an example here that has happened, I've witnessed within my own life and my own lineage through my grandmother. I actually am really fortunate to have an incredible family, and I came from good stock on both sides of my family. And yet it doesn't mean we're not subject to still being in these patterns that the collective is in which we are stuck in these cycles. And my grandmother, bless her, she has passed. And when she was alive in this waking life, she was very particular about the way she looked, her image looking nice, to the extent where she was actually quite joked upon for it. There was a lot of different shame and ridicule and judgment because she was so hyper-focused on the way that she appeared. And what was interesting is as divinity started to channel what we were meant to speak to today on this podcast, they took me back. They actually showed me her in her youth. And her father was quite successful in business. And there was an image to uphold. And they showed me her as a young girl being in this experience of ridicule if she didn't show up as very prim and proper and put together. In fact, the way that divinity channeled it was, you are a disgrace to this family if you do not show up looking this way, behaving this way. And so the image got built, the facade got built, the demand and the pressures of showing up as perfect, as if nothing was ever wrong, was placed upon her, pressed upon her, until she had to almost compulsively live under it as if it was her. And the sadness, I feel, is where they show me the stifling of freedom, the freedom to be a little messy and silly and herself was really just pressed down upon. And so she began to show up as the way she was instructed to show up. The irony is that, fast forward, her family, her children ridiculed, judged, joked upon her for being the very thing that she was forced to become in order to remain in good graces and remain in the acceptance of her family. Now, I share this example not to expose her in any way, but to expose the pattern that is happening within this collective, because we all have our own experience of exactly what this looks like in our own lives. This sadness of feeling like in order to please people or to be enough, that we have to show up in a certain way at the disregard of ourselves. And then being ridiculed or judged or talked about for the very thing we're showing up as. Now, there's no one to blame here. The reason divinity is channeling this message through is so that we can stop hiding as a collective, so that we can start to begin to see that when we reject ourselves, we fall into a cycle of others rejecting us as well. Now, you might say, if I don't reject myself, others may still reject me. Yes, but it won't matter. Because the only time that the rejection of others actually matters is when it becomes internalized by you. Meaning, when you hear the rejection, you see the rejection, and you agree with it, right? The agreement that there's some validity in the negative things that are being said about you or placed upon you. And then the internalization of that to make it about you, right? To link it into your identity is the thing that creates suffering. It is the very thing that creates the experience of rejection in our lives. And so divinity is awakening you today to realize that self-love, non-judgment, unconditional kindness and positive regard must first and foremost begin within yourself in order to then experience that with others. Because in the personal example I shared, when I say that there's no blame, and you think about people who have judged and ridiculed and joked because of the way that she was, they're not at fault for that, truly. Because what happens is there was this internal state within her that was self-rejecting, that magnetized that. And whether or not, as human beings, we can label this, the truth is we know when something is disingenuous. We know when something is lacking its vibrational integrity. And those are the things that are most easily picked apart. Why? Because they're not real. They have no real solid foundations. The things that are most easily picked at are the things that we are trying to keep on. They're actually showing me a visual of the facade of a mask, of kind of this crackling of this exterior, almost like a building's exterior. And understanding that that plaster, that mask, that thing that was pressed upon us takes so much energy to uphold because it is not who we are by nature. Though there is much more courage required for us to be our unique and authentic selves, it is actually the most efficient way to be because it doesn't require overanalyzation. It doesn't require second guessing. It doesn't require hypervigilance of this fight or flight, this constant seeking and scanning for whether or not the exterior is validating us or the exterior is accepting us. When instead, when we fall in love with what we organically and innately are, we rise into this ability to love ourselves beyond all things that are happening externally. For many of you who have been a part of my courses or my community, or maybe you're one-on-one clients of mine, you may already be very aware of a very precise moment in my life where I ran into this. It was the facing for me of this choice between self-destruction and unconditional self-love. And though my innate spiritual gifts have always existed within me, the moment that I chose unconditional self-love, to love myself beyond all judgments and regrets, what happened was divine love showed up and opened up the channel for my innate spiritual gifts to come online stronger and for me to begin to work in co-creation with the divine, not only to heal my past and my patterns, but to be able to help bring others in the awareness of their ability to do that for themselves. Divinity wants you to understand that no matter how painful you feel it is to start to change now, what is more painful is getting to the end of your life and realizing that the thing you sacrificed your whole life was you. There is no reward for not loving yourself fully. It is a painful, painful path. In fact, it's much more intricate than many people realize. This exceptionally painful experience of self-rejection isn't just apparent in the way that we judge ourselves and shame ourselves as if that's not bad enough, right? Here we are with this internal dialogue of harassment and judgment and demeaning. It's abuse. It's internal abuse. But that's just the surface. Because what happens when, as a spirit, we don't vibrate from that core vibration that is our unique vibrational blueprint. It's like a fingerprint, our soul's fingerprint that is just uniquely and organically us. When we don't vibrate from that place, what happens is that our entire system becomes disjointed and disconnected. And on account of that, we begin to experience things on all layers of our essence, from our physical, our mental, our emotional being, and the pain just roots and festers. hidden from the light. If you have been experiencing chronic pain patterns, if you've been experiencing chronic emotional cycles, mental patterns, chances are you are disconnected from the truth of your vibration, this unique essence that holds what you really are. And it's not your fault, and yet it is your responsibility. It has been redirected by the cycles that came before us, the cycles of survival. And it's been coded to vibrate differently, expected to vibrate differently. And you, to survive yourself, started to act in accordance with something that you are not. But the pain speaks louder, and it gets more prevalent, and you see it rising more. It is the messenger. It is what is trying to bring your attention in. Well, they're saying inward. Bring your attention inward into the knowing that there is something within you that has not yet been honored and loved and held. So when we start to see these patterns, understand that it doesn't serve us to place blame. Because what happens is once we start to place blame outside of ourselves, it takes away our capacity to take 100% responsibility and navigate that for our benefit. Because if it's someone else's fault and it's in someone else's hands, then it's out of ours. But instead of falling into the blame of someone outside of you, or even playing the blame game with yourself, Divinity wants to invite you into a moment of gratitude for the awareness, no matter how painful the awareness might be. Gratitude that you are being shown that there's a better way for you, that you don't have to exist within the self-deception. You don't have to exist within the self-judgment. You don't have to exist reliant on the external world to validate you and tell you what your value is. Because the truth is, if you undervalue you, the external world will only reflect that, and they too will undervalue you. For this is an inside job that no one else can do. It is imperative, Divinity says, imperative, that you realize the power that you hold within you to step into your highest potential and your highest value. Guidance was very adamant that I channel this message today because what they're yearning for is bigger than what it seems within this message. Understand that throughout this entire podcast, on this journey with me, what you're going to come to discover is that Divinity is planting seeds. They're setting us up. Because if we were only to receive this podcast transmission intellectually, you might conclude that this is about self-love, about self-value, and knowing your inherent worth. And you would be correct. And Divinity is infinitely at play. Because the reason that this message is a core message for you that is so important is because of where this awakening is taking us. It's because of where Divinity is wanting to guide us as we move into this new world order. Divinity yearns to lead us into living in a world where there is safety within ourselves. And that safety comes from removing the inner judge, removing that harmful inner dialogue and ridicule that rises when we act out of accordance with the program. There is a time that is coming soon in which you will be able to live within the safety of your unique being, And yet it does not come without sacrifice, because the cost is the old you. The cost is the familiar you that you have acted in accordance with your whole life. And often the cost can be disruption from those around you who are afraid that if you change, that they may have to look within themselves to do their own work. And yet, that price is worth it. It is worth it for any soul that chooses to save themselves through the receiving of the transmission of this message, to stop the self-harm, to become free, to be uniquely and innately themselves, and to allow that creativity of how they want to contribute to the world, who they want to be in the world, to become so different and so bright that they have an impact that their soul has desired all along. You are not here to be stuck, especially not during these awakening times. The more patterns you see rising, the more stuck you feel is actually an indicator that they're trying to crack you open to see what has been existing and cycling under the surface so that you can expose it and begin to become what you have always been meant to be. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you all for your willingness to be in the receiving of this divine transmission. And I cannot wait to be with you again on the next episode of Energy Linguist. Namaste. Thank you for being here, for listening with your heart, and for opening to the truth meant just for you. If this transmission resonated, I invite you to visit lauraahern.com for free resources and sacred support to help you accelerate your awakening and walk your path with more power, trust, and grace. Until next time, trust what you feel, honor what you know, and believe in your power to create something greater than you've ever imagined.